How about those girls in our band? That is excellent stuff. I love it. And we're going to start doing something a little different. When I get up on here on Sundays, I'm going to say, hey, Vision. And you're going to respond by saying, hey, Matt. So how about, hey, Vision? Hey, Matt. And then whoever's up here with me, I'll say, hey, Vision. You'll say, hey, Cassie. Hey, Vision? Hey, Cassie. All right. Well, this is Cassie Hill. If you hadn't met her yet, and that was her sister. And I don't know if it brought tears to the family's eyes or not, but in me and my wife were sitting there with tears in our eyes, watching you and your sister live out your faith, your fight, your passion for Jesus. And I couldn't wait to have her up here today to share her story, as we're in part 4 of the Write Your Story series. And so we're going to take a minute now you've caught your breath, and you have written your story. And it's back here on today's canvas, and that will be in the lobby afterwards if you want to read her story. And I do believe it will inspire you in your faith journey. So Cassie, let's jump right in, because you know what? I've known Cassie for years. You see her, she's getting ready to go to college in a couple weeks, but I knew her years ago. Take a look at this. That's her. Aw, that's so sweet. And we had no idea that day that you'd be coming on this stage to share your story. But honestly, I'm not surprised, because I see your family and the people who've poured into you, and I have seen you shaping in the image of Jesus for years. So why don't you tell us what it has been like on your faith journey as a teenager to have courage in this world we're in as a teenager?
Well, I have stage fright, so it takes a lot of courage for me to get up here.
They do too. They do too. Okay, go ahead.
But other than that, it just takes courage to really live for God, especially in today's society and being in the public school system. They expect you to have an open mind. And when they say open mind, they don't mean the things that the Bible's talking about. They're actually very narrow-minded when it comes to that. And it just makes it harder to believe what you believe and know that you're believing in the right thing, and to stand for that no matter what they're saying to you.
Yep, it is. And I tell you, to see what you, and I've got a son in high school, what you have to do to go against that flow, to have that courage is hard. Now how about, I know your dad's wearing his Carolina blue, because that's where you're going in a couple weeks, but how you feeling? But how you feeling about going on to a college campus and having, again, to have courage to go against that flow, to be a light for Christ up at Chapel Hill?
It's definitely going to take a lot more courage to stand for God and for the Bible and what it says in college than it was in high school, because, I mean, honestly, Chapel Hill is very liberal, and they just expect you to have an open mind. Open mind, you know.
Mm-hmm. It's tough on Christians.
Yeah.
It is. You'll get up there, and the people you have in your dorm or where you live, the classes you go to, the groups you hang with, will be pushing against you, and you'll have to have that courage. And I wanted from our students up to our adults to be able to take something away from your story. So kind of your last chance to say something to this crowd. What would you say they should take from your story that maybe can inspire them, wherever they're at in their journey, to live lives of courage for Jesus?
Just remember that love isn't accepting. We're called as Christians to love people through their sin, not to embrace sin. And just because the world is telling you something, it doesn't matter, because in the end, only God's opinion is what truly counts.
I think we can all take that with us. I think we can. Okay. All right, girl. I love you, and thank you for being a part of it today. And thank you, girl. So if you guys want to meet Cassie afterwards, she'll be mingling around, and her canvas will be in the lobby. So thanks, Cassie. Great stuff, girl. Okay, well, let's jump in to part 4 of Write Your Story. If you didn't get a takeaway card yet when you came in, there should be one in the row right in front of you. And I really, really want you to get one today, because this topic of courage is something that I want you to spend time digging into this week. Because again, we can spend some time together in here, spend an hour together or 20, 30 minutes sharing a message. But my goal is to be kind of a catalyst in your life today, so that you'll go into your week and take that takeaway card, and you'll see that there's even more verses on there than normal. And I designed it so that you can get in there and read about other passages, even some of them that you said today. You verbalized these words about courage. or are there people in the Bible that had courage? And you can get into your Bible. And I'll tell you what, if you need a Bible and you do not have one, our care room afterwards, we've got free Bibles in there. There is like no commitment, no nothing. You just stop by and say, Pastor Matt said I could have a Bible. You can just have a Bible, totally. So check in your Bible this week or in your laptop or your phone, whatever you need to get in God's Word this week and talk with Him about the verses you'll see in the takeaway card. I'm telling you, they will make a difference because this isn't just some positive energy talk today. Saying, just think better thoughts and be more courageous and let's just cheer each other on in that. It's not that. Because honestly, I wrestle with this too. And I know Cassie wrestles with it too. And I talked to many of you during the week and you wrestle with it too. That we need truly some help in finding courage. Now this series where we've been so far, if you remember, we started off the first week talking about Barnabas, the encourager. And it was great. This week I was in a meeting and one person at Vision said to another person at Vision, and thank you for sending me that card a couple weeks ago. It was very encouraging. I was like, yes, man, they were listening. Somebody did it and encouraged another person, and it blessed them. It was great. Second week, we talked about going through the fire. And I would imagine, since my talk a couple weeks ago and today, you probably walked through a fire or two, and I'm hoping you thought back to Shadrach and some of the principles we learned from him about walking through the fire. And then last week we came in and talked about Esau and about choices. And I appreciate that the leader of our students, he shared on video. And I'm telling you, if you missed it, check out the sermon online because he shared on video about some things in his past where he made some bad choices. And God honored him and said, you know what, I'm going to walk with you even through those choices and help you find the right path. Because you can overcome those bad choices. You can. Today we're talking about courage. And we're talking about a young lady with courage. And actually, it's not Cassie. We're talking about a girl named Esther. But when I look at young people in our church, we went to Lake Waccamaw with them last week. I'm still tired from all those students wearing me out. Well, we went with those students, and we saw some of these students talking about how God is building courage in their life. And truly, this village of people here can inspire each other on their journey. And you heard about one of them from Grace, about going on her journey. Tell you, courage, we can build each other up. So let's talk about the bottom line for the series. All 8 weeks, same bottom line, that God has a timeless story. No back end, no front end, a timeless story, and we each have a unique and a personal part to play in that bigger story. And I tell you what, I love that because I'm unique, and you know what, you're unique too. And you don't want to be a part of a story that's like distant and way off and something you just hear about. You want to be a part of something that's personal, that God says, I care enough about you, I want you to be a part of the story too. And I love that about God. So that is our bottom line for the series. Now, as John mentioned, we're having baptism in a couple weeks. And baptism, let me talk about this for a minute, is a part of somebody's story in this room as your next step. Because you may have started coming to Vision and said, man, I sense God in a new way now. I've found Jesus, or I'm reconnected with God, or I'm learning about Him. And if you're at a point in your walk, you say, you know what? I am ready to walk with Jesus, or now I am, or I started years ago and now it really is clicking. It's time for you to be baptized. It's an indicator of something on the inside. And we're going to have that outdoor service, and I tell you, it's going to be incredible that we'll have from kids up to older people like me and like Dale, who spoke a couple weeks ago, that will get baptized and say, you know what? Jesus is doing something in my life, and I want to be baptized. And so if you would check, you'll see on your takeaway card and on our website, we talk about our short baptism class we'll offer on the 16th or the 23rd, and you can be baptized. And we're going to have a blast with that. It's going to be a key marker in some people's lives. Now, talk about today. What is courage? Because some people may say, courage, hey, that's like something you hear in the movies or something that somebody says, well, just be more courageous. Well, really, what is courage? Because I'll tell you, courage is not the absence of fear. Because the reality is, if your week's like my week, you're not going to have a week with an absence of fear. Your courage is moving forward in spite of your fear. And again, that's not just to tighten up your bootstraps, suck it up, I'm strong enough to do it. There's something deeper than that. Moving forward in spite of your fear. So then my question is, well, what's fear? Okay, here's the technical definition of fear. It's an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, it's likely to cause pain, or it's a threat. So you think about your life, you come across anything dangerous, something that's likely to cause a pain or a threat, you say, you know, man, I think I've had some of that lately. And I say, well, what do we fear? And you know what? This is cool. We got a room enough a size where I can actually toss out a question and say, hey, somebody tell me something that has feared you. You have feared in the last month. Something you've been scared of in the last month. I want to hear somebody tell me something you've been scared of in the last month. Snakes. Snakes? Snakes, okay. Something else you've been scared of in the last month. Speaking in front of a lot of people. Okay, yes. Going to high school. It's a good one. I saw someone's hand back there. Oh, way in the back, yes. Heights? Scared of heights. It's a good one. All right. Of what? Of scans. I mean, honestly, who's been to the doctor lately or had someone you love go to the doctor lately and the scan, it does scare you? All right, over here. Going to seventh grade. Yes, going to seventh grade. All right, what else has scared you lately? Riding on the interstate. I heard somebody here in the middle. Find suitable child care. That's real. All right, all the way in the back. What's that? Getting bit by a spider. Oh, gosh. Wayne, was that yours too? Mason, definitely. Your kids, their health. All right, and we got two more.
Letting my 15-year-old drive.
Wow. Letting your 15-year-old drive. That is very scary. We got a couple more. Yep. Oh, we were seconding and thirding that, okay? And last one here.
Going to the dentist.
Going to the dentist. Anybody get scared going to the dentist? Yeah, go. Okay, so let's, now, if you're like me, and fear, I mean, I know we talk about all these things in our life that cause fear. Let's have just a little bit of fun with it for a second. I'm not going to show any pictures, but instead, we're going audio on this. So take a listen and see if you know where this sound comes from. Okay. Anybody know where that one's from? The Godfather. Okay. Has anybody ever had an offer made to them they could not refuse? That's scary. That's scary. Okay, how about this next one? Where's this come from? Oh, man. Is anybody going to the beach anytime soon? Yes? I know we got, John is going this afternoon, so he'll be thinking about vision and that sound that always causes fear. Okay, last one. Scary. Wow. All right, okay. Does anybody remember the first time they saw Darth Vader? It caused fear in this 10-year-old or however old I was to see this big guy coming at me, and I hadn't even heard him breathe yet. But you know what? We hear sounds like that, and it conjures up images of fear. But you know what? When you talk about scans, and you talk about kids driving, you talk about the dentist, you talk about speaking in front of people, or honestly, you talk about Sunday night trying to pay the bills, or you talk about Monday trying to get up and figure out how you're going to get it all done, or how you're going to get all the kids, you know, how you're going to get braces, or how you're going to get them where they need to be, or maybe the kid doesn't talk to you anymore, or maybe the job you're looking for. And you honestly, you sit back there and you say, this isn't funny. You say, there's something inside that is fear. And how can I get some help? And I get there too. And I've been there too. And that's why I love this message. And I knew coming into today, as I prayed for today, that God was going to speak to us in a way that will give us courage if we let him work. So we're looking today at a girl named Esther from the Old Testament. And what I'm going to do, we're not going to read a lot of the verses. I'm going to tell you more of the story, because what I'd like you to do this week is I'd like you to read through the story a couple times, to dig in there, jot down some notes, write in your takeaway card or write in your Bible, because I'm telling you, there's going to come a time, whether it's this week or a year from now, where you're going to be scared, and I hope you think back, say, wait a second, Pastor Matt talked about courage. Let me go back to Esther, or let me go to that takeaway card, or let me go to the verse we read in Joshua, and I'm telling you, it will help. Now, the story of Esther, it's strange, because God is not mentioned in her story. And you think that's really strange for something in the Bible. You think God would just be throughout the story. But here's what I encourage you to do. When you read through it, look for clues of God working. Because like the lady I talked to earlier this morning, who said, Matt, if I'd have known on Monday what was going to happen on Friday, I'd have been able to handle Monday much better. But she said, by the time I got to Friday, I was much better, but I didn't know that on Monday. I said, you know what? We're going to talk about that today. How on Monday, you didn't see God or hear from God or think he was even there. But throughout your week, you can look for clues that he's there. And that encourages me. I also like to look in other places in the Bible. And this is what I'm telling you. We got to spend time in God's word. Because as you take time to read through it and you say, what about Joshua? The verse you read, that was from Joshua. Or what about some people from the New Testament like Stephen, like Peter, like Mary, the mother of Jesus, like Hebrews 11 that goes through all these different people that had faith, that had courage, and the more time we're in God's word, it will strengthen our foundation of faith for our courage. So let's talk about Esther. First thing about her, she had stress in her life. She had stress in her life. You think about even somebody like Cassie. You're like, 18 years old, life must be great, it's perfect. You know what? She has stress in her life. You know what? This guy going here in 7th grade, he's got stress in his life. And you know what? My friend back here who's having scans done, he's got stress in his life. So we can all connect with Esther and say, okay, I can kind of understand something about stress. Now, her story is an interesting one of stress because she was a Jew who got taken into exile. Basically, people came into their area, took them all captive, and took them away. We read that and kind of almost gloss over like, well, that's just what happened in those days. Well, no, what if somebody came in today to Gaston County and locked down everybody in Gaston County and hauled us off to Atlanta and said, you know what, you're going to be my slaves and you're going to do things my way and the rest of your life is under my control. I'd say it would radically change the way we look at Esther because that's what happened to her. She got taken away and basically imprisoned as an exile. Now, in her story, you'll see there was this king named Xerxes. And hey, I love biblical names, but we weren't going Xerxes in our house. That's a cool name. But Xerxes is the king. He has his queen, Vashti. Now, the queen, she mishandles the opportunity to be queen and says, I'm not going to do the things you want me to do, king. And basically, she gets fired and or killed. Not included in there, but you check that out. But the reality is the king says, I'm going to find another queen. Puts this big search out there, and Esther gets selected to be one of the candidates. You want to talk reality TV? They had it back then, because these girls come in there and spend a whole year getting ready to go before the king. And I wonder if she danced and sang before the king. You did her little fight song or something like that, and the king said, okay, I'm going to pick you. And basically, Esther gets selected to be the new queen. So things are going okay, but here's the problem. Esther, her main family member she had, a guy named Mordecai, who actually was her cousin, but really had more of kind of an uncle-like or a father-like relationship because her parents were dead. So this guy Mordecai is speaking into her life, and she gets selected to be queen. Well, at the same time, this mean guy Haman. Now, I don't know if you guys know anybody named Haman. It's interesting. I had a friend in high school named Haman, and I always wonder, why did his mama name him Haman? Because Haman is just one bad dude who doesn't do anything right. So Haman rises up to power. The king loves him and says, hey, I'm gonna make you one of my confidants, one of my tight guys. So Haman is going around town, and anywhere he goes, he's saying, hey, I'm Haman, I'm in charge. You will now go ahead and bow down. And people are going to bow down. He goes around town doing that, and this guy Mordecai says, I'm not going to bow down to you. I bow down to God. I'm not going to bow down to you. And Haman says, I'm going to make you bow down. And Mordecai says, you can't make me bow down. So Haman goes into the king and says, hey, king, there's some people out there that don't want to bow down to you. And, it's interesting how, Satan works in these tricky ways, or he speaks through people and twists facts. And the king is confused. He's like, no, everybody should bow down to me. And Haman says, okay, here's what we should do about it. Let's make this decree that anybody who doesn't bow down to you, they'll get killed. And king says, okay, that sounds good. And then Haman kind of weaves it in and says, well, all the Jews are like that. So all those people we brought in, we got to kill them all. And they do this thing where they kind of roll the dice and figure out when it's going to happen. And basically, 11 months from now, they're going to kill them all. So again, you think about all of us Gastonians that went down to Atlanta, we're in exile, and now they say, okay, 11 months from now, we're going to kill you all. You're all going to die. I mean, you talk about stress. Now you're feeling stress. Now, Esther, she's in an interesting spot because she, is in position of the queen. So she has potentially some access to the king. Now, Mordecai and all the Jews are in despair because they see the end coming. Now, we see, here's your second blank, God is still working. God was still working, even though they're in despair that they're going to die, they're in exile, and even though Haman is imposing evil on them, it was still going to be okay because God is still working. Just like my friend who said on Monday something happened, and on Friday something redeemed it. God was still working in her week last week. God is still working with Esther. Now, it's pretty cool because with Mordecai, he actually did this thing where he heard about this assassination plot. I'm telling you again, the Bible, it would make great TV because Mordecai, he hears about these two guys who want to kill the king, and he goes in and tells somebody else and says, hey, these guys are trying to kill the king, and they find out about the plot and fix it. And so Mordecai, he's kind of like, he's got some chips now, where they're like, he's got a little bit of leverage because he did something for the king. So this story winds out to where Mordecai comes to Esther and says, Esther, look, we're in terrible, stressful times, but God's working. But here's the thing. In chapter 4, when you read it this week, there's this verse the whole story hinges on. It says, for if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will rise from another place. Basically, God's saying, I'm going to work, okay? I'm going to do stuff. Is it going to be through you, or is it going to be through someone else? But you and your family's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. For such a time as this, what you're going through, God's going to use you. For such a time as this, the stress you're feeling, God's going to show his power. For such a time as this, it may be your time to stand up and have courage to trust God in it. Because with Esther, third thing, it says we need friends with conviction. We need friends with conviction who will speak into our life and say, look, I know you're stressed. I know you're fearful. I know things aren't looking good, but you know what? God's working. And not just to be a friend who says it's going to be okay, but a friend who also will look at you and say, you might need to do something about it. God may be trying to work through you to do something about it. In my life, I need that, and I've got that with some guys who look into my life and speak truth to me. And Esther had that with Mordecai. And one of the keys in this is that small wins will build courage in us throughout the way. That when you see God work and you hear about somebody who saw God work here, or somebody God did this in a job, or someone did this to build a relationship back, we need to file these away and say, look, God's still working, even if I don't feel like I'm hearing him this week. Now here's the next piece, and this isn't necessarily the fun piece. Esther, under the recommendation of Mordecai, she prayed, she fasted, and then she acted. Now, if you're like me, praying, okay, that's not too tough. You can do it in the car or do it in the shower. You know what? God's talking about like a stop and talk and listen for God kind of prayer. It's you know what, God, I'm going to actually stop my schedule and I'm going to talk with you because I need to hear from you. You may say, okay, I can kind of do that, but that fasting thing? I don't know. I mean, God says, look, I want to see how this matters to you, what you're really praying about, what it means to you. And that's where spiritual disciplines come in. It may mean, you know what, I'm going to give up something, God, to show you how much this means to me. And Esther does. And in fact, she asked her friend Mordecai as well to do it and others to do it. And they bond together and say, you know what, we're going to pray and we're going to fast to see God work, and God will pour in courage. Then the third piece of it is acting. Because you can pray and listen for God. You can hear it. You can even fast and say, God, I want to do this. But if you're like me, sometimes you step up to the plate and you're like, God, I don't know if I can do it. And the reality is, that chance may just pass you by. And God may say, no, it needs to be you. You need to act. Remember when we talked about Shadrach, about how what those guys went through in the fire and how it inspired the other people? They had bowed down, remember that? And yet they got up and said, wait a second, God's still working. We saw him work. Thank you, Shadrach, for doing that, for standing up in the fire. And God says to us, act for such a time as this. You have courage. I can give you courage. You can be brave. Well, let's see what else happens, though. In chapter 5, we see periods of intimidation. Intimidation, where you're starting to gain some of that courage, and somebody stomps it down and says, now, you can't go after that job change. You're not smart enough to do that. You don't have the discipline to do that. They say that relationship, man, don't even try talking to them, because you know what? It was their fault, not yours. You know, even though God's poking you, saying, hey, you have the courage. You go and initiate making peace with them. Or that scan, and you're stressed about it. And you're saying, you know what? I can't think about anything else in life but my health. And God says, wait a second. I formed you. I know how many days you got. I've got a plan for your life. And somehow our focus has to get wider than just on that peace. And God says, wait a second. Don't let the intimidation of that fear drown out what I'm trying to do in your life. Now, you want to talk about fear? Esther and Mordecai? Sure, they're talking about that death thing coming in 11 months. How about when you take a look at this picture of gallows? If anybody remembers what gallows is, that's what they were putting up for Mordecai. That's what they were saying. If you don't bow down, that's what you'll get. You know what? That scares me. If I get up on Monday and say, I'm facing that in my week, I am scared. So what does Esther have to do? She had to take a step of faith. She had to take the step of faith just like we have to take the step of faith. And here's what Esther did. Esther, she prepares a banquet. She says, you know what? I'm going to try to go and talk to the king. But this isn't just like, I'm going to go talk to, the boss or the governor. When you go talk to the king and you walk into his presence, in about 10 seconds, you're going to know whether he's going to talk to you or he's going to kill you. And she walks in there and says, okay, it's my time to take a step of faith. I'm going to go in and talk to the king and make my appeal for these Jews, for my family, for my people. There's a lot riding on this. There's too much. I can't handle it. There's too much pressure. It is so stressful. I can't do it. Mordecai says, no, we're praying for you. We're fasting with you. Take your step of faith. And she goes in and says, King, can I talk to you? And he extends the scepter, which means, okay, first step, good news. You're not dying. Come and talk to me. And she comes in to talk to the king and says, okay, King, I want to talk to you about something real important. I got a banquet prepared. Can you come to that? And the king says, yeah, let's do that. And she kind of scurries away and says, okay, first step, I did it. Remember? Small wins, small wins. He comes on in, and she invited the king and Haman. They come on in. She says, okay, here's what I want to talk to you about. There's something really big going on, and I want to tell you about it. And hey, let's have another banquet tomorrow. I'll have some time to think about it, and I'll put the package together. We'll talk about it. The king says, okay, that's kind of strange. We're sitting here to talk, but we'll meet tomorrow. And she walks away and says, okay, I did that. I'm building my courage up. A small win. God's working. And the next day they come together, and she lays it out. Now, it's so cool. Talk about God working. These gallows we looked at. Esther comes in and says, King, somebody has put together a plan to kill all the Jews, including me. And the king's like, what? That is crazy. And she says, it's him. It's Haman. And the king's like, well, we need to take him out to those gallows and hang him, because we're not doing something crazy like that. And God's plan, last piece, the solution came in God's way, in his timing. When it looked like, man, how is this going to work out? How are we possibly, as all of Gastonia, going to be saved? How is God going to fix this thing? And it came in his way, in his timing. But it took a catalyst. Honestly, it took a spark, like we're talking about this song, that there's going to be some type of explosion of faith that happens where Esther would say, yes, for such a time as this, I'm going to rise up in courage. For such a time as this, when you go to 7th grade, or you go to college, or you go for that scan, or you go taking your kid driving, for such a time as this, I'll rise up in courage, even though I'm scared, and I'm going to see God work. Now, Haman's killed. Mordecai, he gets raised up to leadership. The Jews are saved. It's happily ever after. But you know what? When we're on the front end of the story, we can't possibly see happily ever after. We can't possibly feel happily ever after when we have our fears, when we have our Darth Vader moments, and we're thinking there's no possible way for a good ending. Now, think about this bottom line again. that God, he's got this timeless story. And he wants you to have a unique and personal part in it. So that your fear this week is a part of his story. So that like Esther, you got stress. Like Esther, you, me, we need to believe that God's working. Okay, like Esther, we need friends of conviction. Like Esther, we need to pray and fast and act. Like Esther, we may have times of intimidation. And like Esther, we got to take steps of faith. Like Esther, God's going to be working. Maybe not in the way we think. Maybe not in the timing we think. But God's working. And again, this isn't just a feel-good, positive message. This is a foundation for us to build on. Because you remember a couple weeks ago, we talked about Shadrach. And in that fire, he said, you know what, God will save us. God can save us. But even if he doesn't, I'm not turning away from him. I think that's where Esther and Mordecai were. I think that's where I need to be on Monday when my fear starts to rise up. And I say, God, you know what? Even if the finances don't work, even if I don't figure out what to do about the health issue, the job, the relation, whatever it is, say, God, you're still working. And you know what? We're gonna do something a little different to finish up today. Because instead of a song and all these pieces, we're gonna pray together. And I want to tell you for a minute about our care team. Because we started last week with the connection cards that are back to the chairs, that you can jot on there anything you want prayed for. As well as if you got questions about anything else we talked about today, baptism and ignition, all these pieces. But I want to focus in for a minute that our church prays for you. That our care team, and Wayne, and I was I asked a couple of our care team members just to come stand up here in the front, because I want you guys to see that we have men and women on our care team that want to help you. Cindy, come on up. They care about you. They want to be those friends of conviction that will say, you know what, you're wavering? Hey, lean on me. I'll help you. We'll help you. Whether that means during this time of prayer, you come forward and pray, or over there with Mark, or afterwards in our care room. And let me tell you about our care room. That is a place of grace. It's a place of friendship and acceptance that will say, you know what, come on in here, and we'll talk with you or pray with you or whatever it is you need today. Our care team is here to do that. But in a minute, I'm going to pray. And before I do, I just want to see, by a show of hands, who needs to be prayed for about courage? I mean, really, who says, you know what, I could really use, just hold your hand up real high. Because you know what, you're not alone in that. And I'm not just like symbolically putting mine up. I'm saying, God, I need courage. I need it. I don't want to dream about it or just hear about it. I want to walk in courage. So if you would, close your eyes. And we're going to take about 2 minutes now. We're going to pray together.